Standing as one of the most powerful forces of the Imperium, the Ultramarines have a sector-spanning domain under their command and an unparalleled training and supply infrastructure. And in this video, we're going to show you how to paint your Legionnaire in the colours of the Ultramarines. So grab your paintbrushes, shake those paints, and let's get started. The first thing we need to do is undercoat the model, so naturally we're using Macragge blue for this. After that, we're going to apply a thinned down base coat of Macragge blue, as it does have a slightly different finish to the spray can, and it will just help us if we need to tidy up later. So I'm going to take some Macragge blue here onto the palette, like quite a lot, and then I'm going to thin it down quite a bit. A little bit more. Roll my brush up to a point, and then I'm going to apply that all over the miniature. And with that done, we're going to move on to the other base coats. So we're going to use Abaddon Black for the black areas, Lead Belcher for the silver, Retributor Armour for the gold, and then Corn Red for those eye lenses. So I'm going to take some Abaddon Black here onto the palette, a little bit more, thin it down with some water, and then roll my brush up to a point. And I'm going to carefully apply that onto the black areas of the miniature. I'm using a small base brush for this. Next, we're using Lead Belcher to pick out those silver areas. We're now going to use Retributor Armour to pick out those molecular bonding studs. Now we're going to use Corn Red on those eye lenses. Be as neat as you can, but you can always tidy back up if you make any mistakes. With those base coats done, we're now going to move on to applying contrast. So we're going to use Basilicanum Grey, thinned down with Contrast Medium for this, and I'm going to take 3 parts Contrast Medium onto the palette. 1, 2, and then 3. Quick rinse of the brush there. And then 1 part Basilicanum Grey. Mix that in there. I'm going to roll my brush up to a point. Just make sure there's not too much paint on my brush. And I'm going to apply that all over the black, silver and gold areas and into the recesses of the power armour. And with that contrast applied, we're now going to move on to our highlights. So we're going to use Calgar Blue as the first highlight for the blue power armour, followed by Fenrisian Grey. After that, we'll use Dawnstone for the black areas. So I'm going to take some Calgar Blue here onto the palette. I want to make sure this is quite thin. Roll my brush up to a point. And using the edge of the brush, I'm going to do quite a chunky highlight. Now we're going to use Fenrisian Grey as a final edge highlight for that power armour. Now we're going to use Dawnstone to highlight those black areas. With that done, we're now going to move on to highlighting the metallics. So we're going to use Iron Hand Steel for the silver, Liberator Gold for the gold areas, and then apply a highlight to both using Stormhost Silver. So I'm going to take some Iron Hand Steel onto the palette. A little bit of water. Roll my brush up to a point, and then I'm just going to use that to pick out the raised areas of the silver. Now we're using Liberator Gold to brighten up those gold areas. Now we're using Stormhost Silver as a final highlight for that silver and gold. With the metallics done, we're now going to move on to the eye lenses. We're going to highlight these using Wild Rider Red and then dot the eye using White Scar. So I'm going to take some Wild Rider Red onto the palette. Thin it down. I'm going to make sure my brush is rolled up to a nice fine point for this. Then I'm going to really carefully apply that into those eye lenses. Now we're just going to dot the eye using White Scar. There we are, we're now ready to base the miniature. So we're going to base coat using Xandri Dust, then apply Armageddon Dunes as our texture paint, followed by Agaros Dunes, and then finally dry brush back up using Screaming Skull. So I'm going to take some Xandri Dust onto the palette, thin it down with a touch of water, then I'm going to just apply that all over the base of the miniature. We're doing this so that when the texture paint dries, we make sure we don't have any blue showing through underneath. Now going to use our texture tool to apply Armageddon Dunes all over the base of the miniature. And you can switch to the smaller side of the texture tool just to help move it more carefully around the feet there. We're now going to apply Agaros Dunes all over the base. And we're taking this straight from the pot. And with that contrast applied, we're now going to dry brush back up using Screaming Skull. So I'm going to take a small dry brush and take some of that out onto my paper towel and then just work off as much of that pigment as possible. Just want to leave a little bit on the bristles. Then I'm going to take that onto the miniature and build that up on the base with a couple of layers of dry brushing. Now you can go on to paint the rim of the base in a colour that matches the rest of your army. In this case, we've used Abaddon Black. And there we have it, our Ultramarine Legionnaire is ready to forge a path back to the heart of the Imperium, aiming a vengeful spear at the exposed back of the traitors. So just a couple of things to remember. When you're base coating, it's best to build this up with a couple of thin layers rather than one thick one. This just provides a smoother finish. Also, if you're ever unsure which areas to pick out in certain colours, just refer back to the box art or the images in the codex. Well, that's the end of the video. We hope you've enjoyed watching and we hope you have great fun painting your own miniatures. We'll see you in the next one. Bye!